Go ahead, Daniel.
Okay, so hello everybody. Thank you for being here, and for I just love this community. I'm so grateful to be part of it and to have the opportunity to speak here. So here we are. Let me just minimize some of these things so I can see my own screen a little better. So today I would like to talk about what is happening in the United States of America. I have titled this the Perfect Storm of 2017 because I believe to a great degree that we are in a perfect storm, and that most of us, or a lot of us, are kind of like we're feeling at sea. We'll talk about Neptune and Pisces and all that fun stuff, but I think that there's an overwhelming energy that is just in the air of this country from just so many directions, and I'm hoping that I can sort it all out for everybody today and enable us all to kind of see our way through the storm and to, actually find the meaning of it, because it's when we find the meaning, we can survive anything. So I've entitled this, referred to it as a crisis in consciousness. And here's a great quote from Jiddu Krishnamurti. And he says that a crisis that cannot anymore accept the old norms, the old patterns, the ancient traditions, a particular way of life, though man has cultivated the external world and has more or less mastered it, inwardly he is still as he was. The great deal of animal still in him is still brutal, violent, aggressive, acquisitive, and competitive. And he has built a society along these lines. And I think that this just so outlines not only what's going on, what I'm going to talk about today, but the energies and the different principles and behaviors that we are dealing with as we move through these times. Carl Jung said, what is the great dream? He said it consists of many small dreams and the many acts of humility and submission to their hints. It is the future and the picture of the new world, which we do not yet understand. When I first read this, it kind of gave me chills. It brought me back to the work of Eckhart Tolle and the New Earth. And though we're not going to really get into that with any depth today, I think that really is important to understand that there is a vision that is alive and well in spite of all of the turmoil and the tumult and the trauma, the 3 T's, if you would, that we are all having to witness. I think some of us understand where it's all going, but the question that we all ask is, why do we have to experience it as well? But here we are. And I think that this photo is just so beautiful because it really shows the family, the life that we hope to have of peace and prosperity and abundance and joy and truly life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. If you all will remember, high school and junior high school, middle school, some of the best days were the days where we kind of had a movie. So I've got a short video here that I'd like to play. This is from, I believe it was 1981, from a movie called My Dinner with Andre. And it's just a few minutes long, but I'd like to play it out because it says a lot. And when I heard it, it was such a mirror to what all the things that I've been thinking. Clearly, it's something from over 30 years ago, and I think that there are some alterations as to how we might view it today. But whoops, sorry. But I think it is very, very relevant. If I can just get there we go.
Lying in the bathtub all day, just playing with their plastic duck, and now they're just thinking, well, what can I do? Okay, yes, we are bored. We're all bored now. But has it ever occurred to you, Wally, that the process that creates this boredom that we see in the world now may very well be a self-perpetuating, unconscious form of brainwashing created by a world totalitarian government based on money, and that all of this is much more dangerous than one thinks? And it's not just a question of individual survival, Wally, but that somebody who's bored is asleep, and somebody who's asleep will not say no. See, I keep meeting these people. I mean, Just a few days ago, I met this man whom I greatly admire. He's a Swedish physicist, Gustav Bjornstrand, and he told me that he no longer watches television, he doesn't read newspapers, and he doesn't read magazines. He's completely cut them out of his life because he really does feel that we're living in some kind of Orwellian nightmare now, and that everything that you hear now contributes to turning you into a robot. And when I was at Findhorn, I met this extraordinary English tree expert who had devoted his life to saving trees. Just got back from Washington, lobbying to save the redwoods. He's 84 years old. He always travels with a backpack because he never knows where he's going to be tomorrow. And when I met him at Findhorn, he said to me, "Where are you from?" And I said, "New York." He said, "New York. Yes, that's a very interesting place. Do you know a lot of New Yorkers who keep talking about the fact that they want to leave but never do?" And I said, "Oh, yes." And he said, "Why do you think they don't leave?" I gave him different banal theories. He said, "Oh, I don't think it's that way at all." He said, "I think that New York is the new model for the new concentration camp, where the camp has been built by the inmates themselves, and the inmates are the guards, and they have this pride in this thing they've built. They've built their own prison, and so they exist in a state of schizophrenia, where they are both guards and prisoners, and as a result, they no longer have, having been lobotomized, the capacity to leave the prison they've made, or to even see it as a prison." And then he went into his pocket and he took out a seed for a tree and he said, "This is a pine tree." He put it in my hand and he said, "Escape before it's too late." See, actually for 2 or 3 years now, Chiquita and I have had this very unpleasant feeling that we really should get out. And we really should feel like Jews in Germany in the late 30s. Get out of here. Of course, the problem is where to go, because it seems quite obvious that the whole world is going in the same direction. See, I think it's quite possible that the 1960s represented the last burst of the human being before he was extinguished, and that this is the beginning of the rest of the future now, that from now on there'll simply be all these robots walking around, feeling nothing, thinking nothing, and there'll be nobody left almost to remind them that there once was a species called a human being, with feelings and thoughts, and that history and memory are right now being erased, and soon nobody will really remember that life existed on the planet. Now, of course, Bjornstrand feels that there's really almost no hope, and that we're probably going back to a very savage, lawless, terrifying period. Findhorn people see it a little differently. They're feeling that there'll be these pockets of light springing up in different parts of the world, and that these will be, in a way, invisible planets on this planet, and that as we, or the world, grow colder, we can take invisible space journeys to these different planets, refuel for what it is we need to do on the planet itself, and come back. And it's their feeling that there have to be centers now where people can come and reconstruct a new future for the world. And when I was talking to Gustav Bjornstrand, he was saying that actually these centers are growing up everywhere now. And that what they're trying to do, which is what Findhorn was trying to do, and in a way, what I was trying to do. I mean, these things can't be given names, but in a way, these are all attempts at creating a new kind of school or a new kind of monastery. And Bjornstrand talks about the concept of reserves, islands of safety, where history can be remembered and the human being can continue to function in order to maintain the species through a dark age. In other words, we're talking about an underground, which did exist in a different way during the Dark Ages among the mystical orders of the church. And the purpose of this underground is to find out how to preserve the light, life, the culture, how to keep things living. You see, I keep thinking that what we need is a new language, a language of the heart, languages in the Polish forest where language wasn't needed. Some kind of language between people that is a new kind of poetry. That's the poetry of the dancing bee that tells us where the honey is. And I think that in order to create that language, you're going to have to learn how you can go through a looking glass into another kind of perception where you have that sense of being united to all things, and suddenly you understand everything.
So is there anybody here who does not resonate with this? I mean, that's my whole talk right there. I can stop right here because you've got the message. but you know, it's so prophetic. This was all those years ago, and it just really laid out a, you know, a reality that very few people really were ready to accept in those days. And I think that to a great degree, you know, there's a lot of people on the planet who still aren't understanding or accepting what's going on. So, what I'm going to try and do today, to the best of my ability, is look at the chart of the United States. I use the Gemini rising chart, which is the chart that I learned to use from Jeff Green. And I have found that it actually is quite accurate. And look at the transits to it, the progressions to it. I'm going to say up front, if you're expecting to hear about Mr. So-and-so in Washington, I deliberately excluded him from this conversation because I don't think it's about him. I think that he's just part of the experience that we're having for whatever reason. And I don't want to make it about him, or I really don't want to make him important because I don't think that he is. I think he's only important in the terms of the experience that we're all having, but I'm probably getting ahead of the story. So, you know, when we look at a chart, we have to look at, you know, what has come before, and when we look at an individual, we look at where this individual has been and what the context perhaps of their childhood is, in order to understand how they have their behavior and their personality has developed, and the circumstances and relationships that they have encountered have manifested over time. So I want to do the same thing with our country's chart. And so, you know, what are the real roots of American culture? Where did we come from? What were the philosophies that are the settlers and our predecessors, and even the generations that came later? My grandparents came in the late 19th century. They certainly weren't, you know, on the Mayflower, but each of us has a generational history that we have brought with us, and that in that generational history is contained centuries, if you would, of philosophy and beliefs. And we're going to explore that a little bit here as we get started. And, you know, then we ask, what are the lessons that we're learning as a country? What is the thread of experience? Where is it leading? Is this just some random, you know, series of events that have occurred over time, or is there a thread that is woven through it that is leading somewhere? And, you know, perhaps we can try and understand the tapestry that thread is weaving, and again, to find the meaning here, because we need to have meaning. We need to know what the meaning is. As I said, how are we going to weather this? There was a famous Jungian psychologist, Viktor Frankl, and he tells a very interesting story. He spent several years in the concentration camps during World War II. He was German, a German Jew, and he observed all the other men that were in the camp with him, and he noticed that many of them, you know, were not surviving. They were not going to make it through, and he came to the realization that they had not found any meaning. When he was on one of the forced marches that they put him on, when he had sores on his feet and maybe hadn't eaten, you know, any real food for months, and maybe hadn't eaten anything all day, and it was cold and frostbite, and experiencing the total degradation of, you know, being a human being, he saw himself in the future standing in front of people talking about his experiences in the camp. And that meaning that he derived from those experiences allowed him to survive. I think that perhaps, you know, I don't want to say that our experience is quite as drastic or as harsh as Viktor Frankl's, but we can learn the same lesson from him, that to understand what is the meaning of these experiences and these traumas that we are being forced to endure, and what are they about. So who are we as a nation and as a people? You know, what is our ancestral heritage? What have the philosophies and ideas that we have brought with us? What do they look like? Because they not only color what happened 250 years ago, but they have affected everything that we're really experiencing today. They have really never gone away. They've just kind of morphed, if you would. And I would, hazard, to say without, becoming egocentric about my country, I think our role as, as a world leader since the end of World War II has also expanded those philosophies, around the world. So it's not something that's just happening here. It's happening globally. And what are the roots, and what is it that we really are facing? Where did it come from? Um, has freedom and equality has been the American dream, but has it always been part of our history, or has it been a moving target? Did we ever really have freedom and equality? We like to tell ourselves, we have a narrative that yes, this is the land of the free and the home of the brave. But is that a lie that maybe we've been telling ourselves? And, I hope that everybody will forgive me if, I kind of move into the shadow, but I think we have to understand the shadow. I think we have to understand the darker side of the American culture in order to really get to the heart of what we are all going through, and how this is affecting each of us, even those of us who are not in this country. Excuse me, I just take a drink of water. Have we really shared our resources? Have we shared the land? Have we shared what grows on the land? Have we shared the opportunities that exist within this country? Or has it been something that's been reserved to, to the elite, to just a few? Again, we like to tell ourselves that there's equal opportunities for everyone, but I think if we were to look back, in history over time, we'd find that maybe this was not true. And is our sense of equality, really a sense of feeling more equal? I'm more equal than you are. There's an elitism which pervades the American ethic, if you would, that, if you have money and status and family and land and whatever, that somehow you're better than, somebody else. And again, I don't know that this is just an American experience. I think that it's kind of true globally, that, we are a materialistic society, a materialistic world, the Western world at least. And so, that material abundance, which, to many people are so elusive, is always somehow just a little bit out of reach, is the measure of equality. And yet, that's really not what makes us equal. Has this country always been a level playing field, or has it just been an elite club for the offspring of European landowners? And again, maybe that's a harsh statement, but I feel that that's really true. If you've met anybody who belonged to the DAR, the Daughters of American Revolution, they firmly believe that they are an upper class. That there's something about them that makes them better because they can trace their roots back to the colonial times. And so again, this is one of the ethics and philosophies that just pervades our culture. And we have to ask ourselves, were we ever really a democracy? Were we ever really one man, one vote? And I'm going to strongly maintain that we were not. Our founding fathers, for better or for worse, built all kinds of, besides the balances that were built into the Constitution, they also set up, an electoral college, which really has never allowed a one man, one vote. It really has left the selection of our elected officials to a small elite group who have determined, who those choices will be. I have been voting in national elections since the 1960s, and only once or twice have I, really felt that there was a candidate who reflected my views. I've always held this feeling that I had to choose from who they chose. I never got to choose who I really wanted, and I've always felt that that's been an issue. So we're going to look at our national conditioning. What are the conditions that were originally in place when this country was founded? Famous painting of Pilgrims, English settlers landing on Plymouth Rock in 1642. It happens where I live in Santa Fe. There were Anglos living here earlier than that date. This city is actually older than 1642. An American culture here before then. But again, our common belief in the story we tell ourselves is that this was the beginning of America, but it was really not. There were cultures where I'm sitting today that go back millennia. But that's a topic for another whole discussion. There were three basic philosophies that were brought in by the original settlers. The first was Puritanism. And this is, again, it's a rather graphic indication, but this is a fairly accurate description of what Puritan life was like. I mean, you did what you were told, or you paid the consequences. It was about a righteousness and sovereignty to God. But who decided what that God was, and who decided what was righteous and what that sovereignty would be? And there was this belief that God directed all things by exercise of his will. So, so we're seeing that there's a heavy religious overtone, that it was about a certain religious belief that really determined the ethics of the society, of what was right and wrong, and what was allowed and not allowed, and what was lawful and unlawful. They held the belief that human beings were depraved sinners, that somehow we had been cast out of the Garden of Eden, and that we were, actually deserved fire and brimstone, that, that this was our lot in life, and this was the normal way to perceive human existence. And their belief structure provided for God choosing who was worthy for salvation. Again, there's this external, concept of who really is, where is source? Is source in, someone's, religious agenda, or a source within each one of us, and allows us the right to choose, what we think is right or wrong. All human beings were pledged by the covenant. They had to agree to a covenant to be part of the community. It's almost as if, when you join a company, they give you a non-disclosure statement, and you have to sign it. If you don't sign it, you don't have a job. And they were justly condemned, justly in their eyes, for any failure to adhere to that covenant to which they had been actually forced to agree to. It was an unspoken coercion, threat of fire and brimstone. The other culture, which actually is part of this world that I live in here in the Southwest, were the conquistadors, who came from Spain. And conquistador means conqueror. They were professional soldiers. They were soldiers of fortune, if you would. They were like Blackwater, in the Middle East. And again, there was a heavy religious, context to their belief, because they were all sent here, as part of the extension of the Roman Catholic Church. Inherently, they were drawn here. Their motivation was they were looking for the gold that they had heard was in the indigenous cultures here, the cities of gold of the Aztecs and the Mayans and El Dorado. They were drawn here for wealth. They were drawn here for personal wealth and personal aggrandizement. And it was a religious mission as well. They with the conquistadors came the priests, and as they went from tribe to tribe, from pueblo to pueblo, their intention was to convert everybody to Christianity. They had no regard or respect for the indigenous spiritual beliefs or practices that were here. They believed that they were pagans. They were, just subhuman people. And they were professional warriors, and they were using European tactics. And the indigenous people who they encountered had bows and arrows and spears and knives versus a cavalry with firearms and horses. I mean, it was no contest. It was clearly genocide, and the genocide was facilitated by the disease that they brought, and it was actually the disease that caused more death and more more trauma to the indigenous people than the firearms and the horses. They brought smallpox, chickenpox, diphtheria, typhus, influenza, measles, malaria, and yellow fever. They literally decimated decimated the population. Um, there was a story, and I'm trying to remember all the details of it, but there was a Native American who was from in the northeast of New England, and the tribe actually was the dominant race, the dominant ethnicity for many miles around. And he had the opportunity for whatever to sail back to England on one of the trading ships, the merchant ships. And he was gone for 2 or 3 years. And when he returned, none of his people were still alive. His entire civilization, his entire culture had been wiped out. He literally the last of the Mohicans. That movie really held a lot of truth to it. He was the last of his culture. He was the last man standing. And you can imagine the trauma that he experienced to come back and find that everything that he knew was gone. There was a third philosophy, and this was Freemasonry. And this was the glimmer of light in the shadow. This was the source of the statement and the Declaration of Independence upon which our country was founded. Before there was a Constitution or a Bill of Rights, was the statement that we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, and among these are the pursuit of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So there was this ethic, there was this light that existed, and was embedded in the Freemasons. The Freemasons are actually still active. I don't know, I'm not a Mason myself. I don't know, really whether they're holding to, that same ideal. I can't speak to that. But most of the monuments in Washington, D.C., it's like a Dan Brown movie, are truly erected and embedded with Masonic symbols, and according to sacred Masonic geometry, there was a lot of magic and mysticism that was built into this nation's capital at the time of its birth, and the same ideals were also built into or were also part of our culture, and it really is the root of many of what I believe to be the true American dream that has existed, though not flourished, ever since. It was based on the concept of gnosis, that the knowledge of transcendence arrived by way of interior intuitive means. We did not have to unequivocally surrender to some god, to some male sky god, or some one of his agents. That within us we all held that source of true divinity, and that we could arrive at our own radiant abundance, radiant being, if you would, by going inside, not by looking outside, towards something that would provide that transcendent experience. It was a direct personal experience of God. We didn't need a priest or a pastor or a rabbi to tell us, or to connect us with God. That we each have that ability to go within inside of ourselves and find that source. And itself in the medium myth, much of the mythology, and within it contains those archetypes, that are themselves hold an entire encyclopedia of the nature of human existence and human experience, and hold those stories. There's much more to our ancient history, and again, it's out of scope for this talk. But even going back 6,000 years, we don't really, in my opinion, get to the roots of where this all began or who we are. We only know what we've been told over the past literally couple of hundred years. the victors always rewrite history. And perhaps the history that we have been given is just, again, a personal interpretation. It's a subjective reality that's their truth. It's not the whole truth. It's not the ultimate truth. And as I said, the Masons built many of the important national buildings and monuments, and they incorporated in them traditional occult and astrological symbolism. So, astrology was alive and well at in the early days of this country, and its rebirth now, which is so phenomenal and exciting to all of us here, certainly. Really can trace its roots back to those early days. It used to be that astrology was, like math or science, or mathematics. It wasn't considered to be something that was, voodoo, or it wasn't the Rick Tornes said, the golden rule of superstition. But, again, in the shadow, Thomas Paine, Benjamin Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, George Washington were all Freemasons. However, most of them were slave owners. Slavery was part of our culture. This country was born on the backs of Negro slaves who, in a triangular trade, were brought here from Africa. It's not a good part of our history. And it's a sad fact that in 1776, there were 500,000 Negro slaves in America. It was 1/5 of the population. Excuse me. So as I said, I use the Gemini rising chart. I certainly, I'm not going to argue that this is the only way to look at it. I believe that astrology works, so all astrology works. There are many ways to come at it. There are charts that are erected. Obviously, the Sibley chart is a different time. There are some astrologers who use the adoption of the United States Constitution, but actually, there's some who use the chart for when it was actually ratified months later. So there are a number of different charts, and I don't think it's necessary to argue which one is correct. I work with this one. I understand a lot of my country's history from this chart. And I want to point out that, Benjamin Franklin and John Adams were, Benjamin Franklin especially, were interested in astrology. They knew what was happening, celestially. And it does not surprise me that they would have chosen to sign the Declaration of Independence with the Uranus on the horizon, with Uranus rising. I think that was a deliberate choice because it truly reflects this country's nature and the way that we are instinctively express ourselves in the world. But we'll come to that as this progresses. So we'll start with Pluto, obviously, because that's the EA methodology. And here we're looking at Pluto and Capricorn in the 9th house. These were deep beliefs backed by power and authority. The original settlers traveled great distances, Sagittarius, ninth house, to find the truth, to find freedom, to find, a place where they could, be free and live, according to their own ideas and beliefs without any restraint or impairment. I think that's a very deep Sagittarian 9th house, certainly Capricorn placement. The importance of the country's role in the world, again, as a world leader, is a sense of a national identity, in that regard. And we'll also see that restated when we look at the lunar nodes. And the foundation of the spiritual beliefs upon which were so important to this country that I delineated in the previous slides. The ideas of Puritanism, or that the conquistadors and the Spanish explorers brought Christianity to the western part of the United States, and also the Freemasonry, which came from England. All of that is, I believe, totally represented by this Pluto placement. And it's also, unfortunately, evangelism and the need to convince others of these beliefs. I hope I'm not going to be guilty of that here today. But certainly, we all recognize that within that Sagittarian archetype is the belief that our truth is the only truth, and to try and convince others of that fact. And again, it's a subjective truth. It's a personal truth, but it's not the truth, not the whole truth. And it often incorporating religious indoctrination in domestic and foreign policy. The idea of censorship of films and just gender inequality for many years. There's a lot of religious indoctrination that's part of the way that the laws of this country have been laid down, and part of the foundation of our culture and the way that things have worked, and the decisions that were made. Again, there's an ancestral history of religious conditioning they brought with them. And it's interesting to note that the settlers, the original pilgrims at Plymouth Rock, came to escape persecution, but as soon as they got here, they began to persecute everybody who didn't believe as they did. They actually brought that same phenomenon with them. They didn't leave it behind. They were so conditioned by the culture they came from that they just repeated it. And unfortunately, it's a capability of ruthlessness. Pluto, brutality and exploitation of in the dissemination of those beliefs. That if somebody gets in your way, you just roll them over. Roll over them. And it's also an obsession with the land and natural resources. Our country is very much about the resources and the land. Landowners themselves immediately became the elite. The plantations of the original 13 colonies, and even as we expanded, across the breadth of our country, through the decades, it was still the land and its natural resources which were important, and really became the basis of the material abundance that was pursued as part of that American dream. And it's a compulsion of power. Certainly, we have seen many examples, and even most most recently, that power is being wielded without any consequence of any thought of the consequences of it, or the trauma that would be inflicted by it. That power itself was what they say, power corrupts, and power corrupts ultimately. I think I've misquoted that, but I think that you're all familiar with that saying. And it's also the efforts to control the media. Again, it's the need to control the dissemination of ideas, so that the belief system itself can be protected and become entrenched, so that there's a crystallization that would occur in terms of those beliefs in the structures and procedures and laws of the country, laws of the land. So the lunar nodes, the south node is in Aquarius, 9th house, and the north node is in Leo, 3rd house. And we can see in this south node is the root, the roots of the need for freedom and independence. This Aquarian nature to be liberated. It's what our country was founded upon, was liberty and the sense of being liberated. It's also important to note that these nodes are stationary. When any planet is stationary, it's equivalent to taking a magnifying glass and holding it up to the sun, and the focus of that sunlight on anything will just burn in without any resistance. It's just becomes a very volatile, fiery force. So when with these nodes stationary, this need for liberty, for freedom and independence is quite intense. It's burning in. It was burning in the hearts of those who came here, and it's burning in the hearts and souls of many people who are still here living in this country. It has never gone away. It's just part of our nature. We want to be free. We want to be independent, and we want our individuality as well. Individuality is very important to us. And we'll come back to that later in this conversation, because that individuality itself has reached monumental, radical expression. It represents our strong leadership in the world. The North Node in Leo. We've taken our place as a world leader since World War II. It's questionable whether that is persisting. With the emergence of the BRIC nations, Brazil, Russia, Iran, and China. Are we really the world leader? I think that that polarity has come more into balance. I don't think that the Western world is now the most potent force, either spiritually, economically, or physically. Our position has certainly been challenged, but this has been our role. This has been our self-image, if you would, and it's the way that we've expressed ourselves. It's been our voice. Third house. That basically it's about our country. Taking the lead, and you'll see we talk about Mars, being the protector of the world. And, this Aquarian energy is also a sense of self-importance and specialness. There's something about people who have a lot of Uranian energy that they feel special. And Leos especially feel special. This whole polarity is again, about, a really enhanced ego. Leo is our personal ego. And Aquarius is how that we project that ego out into community. It becomes our collective ego, if you would, or our ego within community. And so there is this sense of self-importance and specialness that's really exerted here. And again, it's based on our ideas and our beliefs. It's this third house, ninth house axis where we believe that, what we believe is, that's it, that's the truth. And we're going to express it in the world, and we're going to enforce it. We're going to enforce it at home, and we're going to do our best to, save the world for democracy. I would turn that around and, say that maybe we should be saving the world from our democracy. And there's an emotional detachment. There's a ruthlessness that's born out of this, instinct, if you would, to just express who we are, and, be so over the top, egoically, in terms of who we see that we are and how we need to project that in the world. It's the projection of our national truth on the rest of the world. Our truth is the truth, and your truth is, really not. So you need to listen to us or else. And the need to control the environment. We've worked very hard to, Uranus is technology, and we have developed all kinds of technology to control nature. And what's really, beginning to happen is that nature is rebelling against our attempt to control it. We're controlling the air, we're controlling the production of food, we're controlling, all the natural resources of the world through science, but yet we have not really improved it. We have only somehow genetically modified it so that it's more profitable. Geographically, we have, clearly, tried to take control of, either economically or physically different different regions of the world. Ecologically, we've, again, tried to control the ecology, trying to, make it work in terms of being more productive to produce more money for those who are going to benefit from it. And certainly politically, to be able to control, our environment and the world around us, our local environment and our environment at a distance, political. It's very interesting that, we're dealing with this situation where supposedly the Russians have come in and hacked, the electoral process. And, it's very interesting because the CIA is known to have manipulated many, many elections in Central and South America, and who knows what else. So, this is what it looks like to be on the receiving end, not on the giving end. To have another country come in and, mess around with our stuff rather than, we see what it's like when we go into another country and starting to mess with their stuff. What goes around comes around. And it represents the patriarchal Uncle Sam. Uncle Sam is our patriarchal figure. He's our Zeus, not our Athena, clearly. He's our Zeus. He's our sky god, if you would. A patriarchal personification of our country. And also it's this sense that, the government is here to save us and fix us. And I think that this is another whole dimension of American mentality, where we believe that we live in a fix me world, that we can eat whatever we want and we can go to the doctor when our cholesterol gets too high and get a pill for it. That we can quote sin, or we can cross the line ethically, spiritually, and go and receive some kind of absolution. Well, we don't take responsibility for ourselves, and clearly the issues that we're seeing environmentally and politically are a result of that, where we have delegated the responsibility to somebody else. And I would suggest that anyone who, certainly in the Democratic Party or in either party, who failed to vote in the last election, can blame themselves for the outcome, because voter turnout in our country is an extremely low, percentage. And I know that there are many people in the Democratic Party. I am a registered Democrat for what that's worth. But I was not happy again with the choice of the candidate that I had. And I considered, okay, I'm not going to vote. But I realized that not voting for who was the choice that I was given was a vote for the opposition. And I think that, part of the lesson that we're learning collectively is that we didn't take responsibility, that we left it to somebody else to decide. And now we're having to deal with the consequences of it after the fact. And unfortunately, it's too late. It's the morning after. There's not much that we can do except, gather, ourselves together, pick ourselves up and, dust ourselves off and meet the next time we have a choice, make a different, better choice, to recognize that we didn't make the right choice, because but we've been conditioned to do that. We've been conditioned to just, know that somebody can fix us somehow. And these are ideas and beliefs that are self-serving. I think that I've kind of covered this pretty well. Basically, we're holding on to what's familiar because it's safe. Because we even though perhaps we know that it doesn't work for us, we don't want to choose something different. It's our human nature. Then to go out and make a different choice, where maybe the downside of it is so unknown that it's scarier than the what we have already that we're dealing with.
Daniel.
Yes.
We'll need to stop now for 15-minute break, and we can start part 2 then. Okie dokie?
Yes, I don't think I'm even halfway through because I'm going so slow. So I'll probably have to speed up the second part, or maybe continue this, at another time. But I'm just keep going.
Okay, so we'll be back in 15. See you then.
Okay.